But in studying the painting, Lincoln was becoming attuned to its details, and he noticed an anomaly. In the X-ray, the underpainting beneath this shepherd's wreath is visible, and here it can be seen that the line of the tomb is painted on top of the staff. In other words, the shepherd's staff had been painted before the tomb. Lincoln thought it odd that a foreground item should be painted before its background. What was important about the staff that it should be placed first? Having had his attention drawn to the staff, he was curious to see what else could be said about it. Well, it's divided by the shepherd's arm. But more than that, it is precisely divided in two by the shepherd's arm. These two distances are exactly equal. And this is the same distance as this, and this, and this, and this. This seemed a significant discovery. The repetition of a fixed measure throughout the canvas suggested an underlying structure, where a seemingly relaxed and fluid depiction of a natural scene was in fact being dictated by rigid rules. Expert help was needed, and this was sought from Professor Christopher Cornford of the Royal College of Art, who'd made a particular study of the geometrical composition of paintings. He'd already analysed another work of Poussin's in this way, and he agreed to do the same with the Shepherds of Arcadia. The outcome of this study was startling. Startling to Cornford, because in this painting, Poussin had structured the image not only using a technique which, as expected, conformed to the presiding Renaissance philosophy, but he'd also simultaneously employed an archaic Masonic geometric system which had been known to the ancient Egyptians. This technique should not have been present in a 17th century painting, and yet here it was, a masterpiece based on an ancient and mystical form, the Pentacle.
Now, to say that Professor Cornford was surprised is a little bit of an understatement. What my reaction to it was, because suddenly again this five-pointed star image had raised itself. I'd found it in the parchment, and now here it was in the painting, and it didn't seem to have any significance whatsoever. It was a long time later, when researching other aspects of the story and asking other simple questions, why was the church dedicated to Mary Magdalene, that we discovered that Mary Magdalene was regarded as the medium of the secret revelation. And she had been given as her symbol in the heavens the planet Venus. And now, curiously, we come back again to geometry, because each planet, as it revolves in the heavens, creates alignments. There's only one planet which creates a regular figure in the heavens, and that planet is Venus, the Magdalene, and the design which she draws in the heavens is again the five-pointed star. Why? There was the crucial question. Why was the five-pointed star appearing again and again in this story? What possible significance could it have?
Professor Cornford knew that Lincoln was seeking the answer to a puzzle and was aware of some of the background to the story. In concluding his report on the painting, he made the following unexpected suggestion. Would it be worthwhile testing the map for the presence of pentagonal angles and vectors?
Look for geometry in the landscape. It wasn't very easy to know what exactly one should be looking for. Looking for a pentagon in the landscape didn't seem to be a very simple thing to do, but it occurred to me that a pentacle was made up of 5 overlapping triangles, and I wondered if a triangle, which after all has only 3 points, might be easier to find than 5 points. And what 3 points could there be associated with the story? And that's when I realized there were in fact 3 castles associated with the story. There was the castle at Rennes-le-Château, there was the Templar castle at Bézieux, and there was also the castle built by Bertrand de Blanchefort, who was 4th Grand Master of the Knights Templar. So I looked at the 3 castles on the map, and each one was on a natural mountain peak. There they were, clearly marked on the map. And when I drew the triangle and measured the angles, I found that in fact I was looking at what one could call a pentagonal triangle. It was exactly that triangle with angles of 36 degrees and 72 degrees that made up a pentagon. The obvious next step was to look for the other 2 points of the pentagon, and then to find that they were already marked on the map, not with castles, this time with spot heights marked on the map. What I had was 5 natural mountain peaks in perfect pentagonal geometry. Now that was extraordinary.
The parchments, the painting of the tomb near Rennes-le-Château, the occult relationship of the Magdalene to the planet Venus, and now a perfect pentacle described by the landscape itself.
The next thought, the significance of that geometric shape. After all, it doesn't matter if we, with our 21st century skepticism, adopt the attitude, well, so what, it's just coincidence, what does it matter? If this was noticed in the past, and remember, we must look at this story in the way that our ancestors looked at it and not the way that we look at it. For them, that would have been a staggering, God-given geometry.
In the third of the BBC films made 4 years later, Lincoln was able to explore that idea. The Shadow of the Templars, the last of Lincoln's BBC films, was broadcast in 1979.
And David Wood, one of the viewers of that programme, who was a skilled and trained cartographer, was intrigued by the idea, and he, knowing about cartography, looked at it and in his own way then found additional geometry.
As already mentioned, one of the main source documents that supposedly helped to establish the credentials of the Priory of Zion was the Dossier Secret, an assortment of papers deposited in the Bibliothèque Nationale during the late 1950s. Many other obscure pamphlets and papers relating to the Rennes-le-Château story were deposited around the same time, and among these was a small booklet called Le Serpent Rouge. Following a line of clues he detected in the text of this work, David Wood examined the sunrise line as seen from Rennes-le-Château on the 22nd of July, feast day of Mary Magdalene. It was said that on that day the sun is seen to rise directly over Blanchefort. When he drew this line on the map, Wood found that it passed precisely through the church in the village of Arc. A line in Le Serpent Rouge reads, "On his white rock, looking beyond the black rock towards the south." Blanchefort means white fort, and on the same mountain, towards the south, is Rocanegre, black rock. Extending a line from Blanchefort to Rocanegre, Wood found it struck the church at Rennes-les-Bains precisely. What's more, This line sits at an exact 90 degrees to the sunrise line. Another line in the Serpent Rouge reads, "Find the line of the meridian in going from east to west." The Paris meridian, which was only replaced by the Greenwich meridian in 1884, passes Wood's sunrise line between Blanchefort and Arc. The angle between these two lines is 72 degrees, the base angle of a pentagram. Again, following clues in the booklet, Wood measured the distance between Arc and Rennes-le-Château and divided it into 6. The second division from Arc along the sunrise line fell exactly on the Paris meridian, and he saw that the distance from Roccanegra to Rennes-les-Bains was identical to one of these divisions. The Poussin tomb is here. Knowing the importance in the story of the tomb, Wood looked for a possible connection with the structure that was emerging. He drew a line from the tomb through the intersection of the meridian and the sunrise line and discovered that it too hit Rennes-les-Bains church. Wood's next move may have been a lucky guess, but seeing that the church at Rennes-les-Bains was significant to the design, he sought a reiteration of the distance to Roccanegra along this latest line and marked it off. His trained eye then spotted something extraordinary. To confirm what he seemed to be seeing, he traced a circle round this point using the distance to Rennes-le-Château as the radius measure. This circumference exactly marks off the castle of Custosa, Serres Castle, the point of intersection of the Paris meridian and the sunrise line, Les Toustoun, the prominent outcrop that can be seen in Poussin's painting, the church at Bougarache, and the church of Saint-Just-le-Bézou. But Wood was on the hunt for a pentacle. Marking off the essential 36-degree angles within the circle produced this. An astounding discovery. For David Wood, this was the start of a line of inquiry that would eventually result in the publication of his own book, Genesis, in 1985.
From my point of view, when David Wood contacted me and told me that he had this additional level of geometry, was the first indication that I had had that there was anything beyond the 5 mountains. And I realized that his discovery left to one side that original discovery, my Pentacle of Mountains, which had led him to it. I realized that I had to put the two together, and as soon as I put the two together, I realized that they were interlocked and that the whole thing was much bigger than he had expected.
In fact, the whole phenomenon was much bigger than even Lincoln expected. For Rennes-le-Château wasn't the only place to be revealing its geometric secrets. 1,000 miles away, on the tiny Danish island of Bornholm in the Baltic Sea, a journalist and filmmaker named Erling Jorgensen had become intrigued by the unusual round churches which are found there.
Well, you see, I am born at Bornholm, and I had spent some time in Copenhagen,